Hey, and welcome to another episode of the Get More Students podcast. I'm your co-host, Alex Asher, CEO of LearnCube.
And I'm Herbert Gozer, founder of herbertgozer.com.
And today we are focused on, I think there's a fun and fascinating question here, and we get asked a lot, is what does it take to grow your language or tutoring company post-COVID? So what does it take?
Yeah.
Bro? What does it take?
Looking into that crystal ball.
And Herb and I were talking about this topic because we speak to a lot of language schools, a lot of tutoring businesses on a daily basis, and it's everyone's looking at that crystal ball, particularly with so much uncertainty. And one of the reasons we felt that we can help explore this topic for our audience listening in is for a couple of reasons, and I'll start with my own, and then I think certainly you'll be interested to know why Herbert has a lot of experience in this as well. But I run a company called LearnCube. We specialize in helping online language and tutoring businesses grow with our virtual classroom and online school solution. And as you can imagine, we are incredibly exposed to particularly a lot of physical language schools and a lot of physical tutoring companies having to reimagine their entire future in this time. And I think it's really important that they do, and I think when you listen into this conversation, you'll understand why. And Herbert, tell the listeners here your experience as well. I think it's really relevant.
Absolutely. Well, I run an advertising agency specialized in language schools and education companies, and we run their paid ad campaigns for them to promote their in-person and online language courses. So yeah, I talk to language school owners and marketers every day, not only about Facebook ads, Google ads, but what does the future hold? And LearnCube being the virtual learning platform it is, I think you're already part of that future, because I've had a lot of schools ask me, what's the best virtual learning platform to use? Zoom, Skype are okay to start off with, but these schools are looking for something more solid, more branded, more professional moving forward. And another thing that these schools ask is, what is the new normal? Or going back to normal? What does that look like? And is there a new normal? Is there a normal now? Really, we're trying to continue to innovate and look to the future rather than going back to maybe the strategies and, what we used to do pre-COVID. So yeah, interested to hear your opinions about this as well, Alex.
Yeah, I think it's a similar kind of question. And I think we're exposed to it when we're talking with physical language schools and tutoring companies, because their question when they're talking to us is like, I love it. It's sort of, it's got everything I want, but when things go back to normal, will I need to kind of have made this investment? Will I be investing too early, or is there a reason maybe why I should just sort of stick with what I'm already doing? And I think this conversation is going to be quite helpful, because the opposite is also true, right? We've got people that are like, oh wow, this is such a once in a generation opportunity. People are just resting on their laurels. They're sleeping at the wheel here. I'm going to capture as much market share as I can, and think really innovatively about this and really treat it as an opportunity. I think there's some really big differences in how people view exactly the same conditions in the same environment. Absolutely. And one of the things I was going to ask you on, Herbert, was particularly because you don't have just an understanding of marketing with language schools, but you actually work for physical language schools. You've got a very intimate understanding of this industry. So tell me about, what was the strategy before COVID-19 as almost a reference point?
Yes, I mean, physical language schools, so brick and mortar language schools in cities and in towns, they were all about expanding, having more bums on seats, which kind of meant renting out more space or taking up a new floor in a building, or even opening up another school within the same city. You know, I've heard and seen about those schools. Obviously, that's not happening now. And also just in the industry, there was a lot of consolidation happening. So either market leaders acquiring smaller language schools, or just language schools really gunning to become the market leader in their niche. So, I mean, there was a lot of competition back then, as there is now in this kind of new digital landscape, but it was a bit different.
Yeah, and I think in the tutoring side of things, look, I'm not going to pretend like I'm an expert in physical tutoring organizations, but we do know a lot through our online tutoring exposure. But what seems to be quite true was that in the tutoring side of things, unlike the physical language sector, it was definitely a faster growing part of that segment. There was a kind of a sense of moving away from just only if your kid absolutely needs tutoring do we bring in a tutor, to being something that actually seemed quite aspirational. I think a lot of particularly countries in Asia which had quite privatized education systems already saw phenomenal growth in the online tutoring sector in particular, but in tutoring in general. Countries like the States were already seeing huge increases in demands for tutoring. So that whole sector was just growing and rising. And I guess along with that tide, raising all boats, as they say. But it did seem like the big thing was to go franchise. It's like, okay, once you've got it once, rather than trying to get really large tutoring locations, like it's not like one location. The idea is to have lots and lots of different locations and kind of grow almost like a geographical spread, rather than in physical language schools where you often want to consolidate in one particular location.
Yeah. Sure.
So there's a bit of a difference there in terms of the pre-COVID strategies. But what I thought was really fascinating when we were talking about this before, Herbert, was just, what's the strategy post-COVID?
Right.
It's all very well looking at the past, but literally the past is the past. It is no longer. It's partially helpful in terms of a guide and indicator, but it's the future that we're all trying to get to and trying to be a meaningful part of that future. So, I mean, some really obvious things in the language learning space, Herbert. What were some of the ones that we were talking about was how real estate is gone from being this, you want more real estate and you look to try and really maximize as many people as you can in a single space.
Prime location, etc. And now that's become a liability.
It's a really big liability. And it's expensive, right? Because that becomes like a massive overhead that eats away whatever capital you had left over. And bums and seats is a pretty hard thing to do when your number one marketing channel was actually agents. So that's a big change. It may not be forever, and I kind of want to acknowledge those that might be listening that agents definitely have a place for certain types of businesses. But right now, a lot of language schools have had to massively change their strategy to how can we directly engage with our potential prospects? How can we directly market to those? What's your kind of feeling on this, Herbert? And you've got some great examples as well of that, exactly that kind of terminal switch.
Absolutely. I mean, some of my clients have gone from in-person to having 3 locations in one city to being 100% online, and they're not looking back. They're not going to open another location, like go back to in-person classes. They've made that decision, and I know that's a huge decision to make. That the future is online. It's up to them if they really feel, and of course every language school is different, whether or not you can sustain that business online. For destination schools, obviously that's not going to be possible. But I just thought that was an amazing brash move from being an in-person brick and mortar language school for 10 years to all of a sudden closing all three locations and going online. But they did it quickly, and they have prospered because they were quick to move, and they really saw the value in going direct to consumer and investing in social media marketing and growing their online presence.
It does seem like one of the major reasons why there has to be such a big switch is this idea of, particularly in the language sector, and we're going to look at tutoring slightly differently, but in the language sector, selling a destination was a very common, strategy, right? Is find the destination, sell that dream of that destination. But it's difficult to play out that strategy at the moment. What are the main reasons why it's hard to keep that strategy going at the moment, Herbert?
Well, just because people are still hesitant to travel. I mean, countries are opening back up. Summer's looking pretty okay, at least here in Europe. Yeah, I mean, when selling a destination, you really rely on a much more persuasive selling process. It's basically like a tourism advert, and people get hooked on the location before the school. But when you don't have a location, then you have to kind of adjust your marketing strategy. And do you have the best native teachers out there? Do you have an interesting method that is or approach that is better to acquire language skills? So at least in this time of travel restrictions and lockdowns, a lot of these destination schools have had to really flip their marketing message.
Yeah, because they've really it's been much harder to. For example, agents are incredibly important when you're selling something that really requires to be sold, particularly, maybe not for like a really well-known destination, but in that case, sometimes it's more around the competition, trying to find the right agents to be able to get those kinds of people. But if you've got a destination that's kind of unusual, that can make things quite difficult. I think you've got a great example of that. Do you want to actually take us through that, actually, Herbert?
Sure. I mean, I have a client with a language school in Provo, in Utah, which is a very small town. And of course, they're competing with these big language schools in Miami, in New York, in Los Angeles. And how are you supposed to compete against those flashy destinations that just pump millions into their tourism campaigns? And people love the American dream, so to say, of going to Miami or LA or New York and having that experience. Smaller schools in maybe not so well known locations have to use a different approach and maybe really go niche on their target audience, which this particular school did.
Yeah, but I mean, even the ones that are in Miami, right? They're kind of, I think they would have had to adjust as well. It wouldn't be about destinations, because people can't get to those large cities, and maybe some people see cities as being less safe maybe than non. So I think there's a whole bunch of moving goalposts.
Moving parts. Yeah. Absolutely.
But, I mean, destination schools will really need to have a lot of savings to be able to wait this out, which is, I think, the big part of this question that we're trying to answer today is like, what does it take to build a successful language or tutoring company, and let's call it the modern age? And the answer is you can't wait for things to go back because they're not.
No.
And you can't wait for them you can't wait to go back because the whole landscape is changing, and if you're static, you're going to get kind of caught up in a bit of an earthquake there. But let's look at some other parts of the language sector that could be, you might have had different systems and maybe in a different position to be able to wait it out and ride that out. What are your thoughts on starting with like local language schools?
Right. I mean, again, in those lockdowns, they had to be resourceful and try and seek out new opportunities. And most local language schools that I spoke to, or, have dealt with, obviously going online has been a not so bad thing because they've been able to expand their reach and go into new markets. But they've also had to innovate with releasing or creating different products, perhaps a self-learning course. I know one school that created a learning app for their students, just really gaining any type of competitive advantage because in the online space, again, it's a quite level playing field where you're competing against worldwide companies.
Yeah, I think so. And for me, there's just no downside of innovation. Like, what could be the worst that would happen with innovation? I mean, I guess failure, but you learn from failure. You become a strong organization. You attract different people. Sometimes you get rid of people that don't want to innovate, and you actually draw new ideas, and it's fun. Like it's the whole purpose of in some ways a living, right? Is just to try and learn and grow. If you're not doing that, it does seem like a strange thing, and particularly to expect that the rest of the world won't grow and change and adapt over time. Mm-hmm. But I think one of the other aspects that's really important is this idea of market share. So if you're doing nothing, then you really are losing market share. There's not going to be there's no doubt in my mind that if you do nothing, if you don't innovate, or even sometimes if you just close up shop like a bit of a tortoise and kind of hope that you can poke your head out again in the future,
just wait it out.
It's going to be a different landscape completely.
Oh yes, yeah.
And I think we're already seeing that with the online language schools. I mean, this is kind of an area that I'm a lot more attuned to. I mean, we definitely saw all of our customers that already had, our product as the online school already there. They were just leaps and bounds ahead of the competition. They already had 3 months of the competition before the online competition had figured out which platform to even think of.
Exactly.
So already, just in that small amount of time, you had major changes in market share, and those that had really already thought about online were just leaps and bounds ahead. And so that was one aspect, was just on market share. But that assumes that the market was the same size. And in fact, online has really exploded, right? Particularly because people were forced. And sure, that balloon might reduce a little bit, but that it's still market share, particularly in the local language school. Like if you've been teaching people in a local area, even when things go back to normal, you've already got a relationship. You've already got things happening. All those people that might have been online that now can go in person, well, they're going to go to you anyway because you've already got that relationship. It's not like an old relationship. This could be a new relationship, but it's the freshest one. It's the one that's most present if you've done a good job there. So I think certainly from what we've seen in the online language space is those that already had kind of a platform, they really revved up. They were already ready for it. They captured market share. And even with more competition, they were just so far ahead of the competition because they already had those, they had no baggage, they had their website set up. I mean, Herbert, you know this. I mean, from a marketing perspective, what did you see?
Well, those online language schools already knew how to acquire students online. They were already investing in paid advertising. They had their social media up to scratch. And for those physical language schools, that was a difficult transition, especially those that relied on agents in the past and didn't really have to do a lot online to market direct to consumer. That was a tough transition.
I mean, what we also saw was the same actually also with tutoring. So we've talked about language education, but also in tutoring we saw very similar things. So local tutoring agencies, you can wait it out if you like, but the whole landscape is totally changing. And we're also seeing probably even more so that a lot of people are doing particularly tutoring online and loving it, particularly like a one-on-one online tutoring experience. It's fantastic. It's really engaging. You've got fantastic tools now that you can really use to engage your students. You've got ways to automate certain things. You can enrich things with just the tap of a button. All these resources right on your fingertips. So there's a lot of reasons why people actually find this experience kind of just works. And the longer we're in this situation, the more entrenched those new behaviors become. So I don't think the demand is likely to let up. I mean, yes, it'll go down from 100% to various fractions, as things do go back to a different level. But, the overall online demand is absolutely there. And we're already seeing as well, like one other thing that we can't forget is also there's just huge money being thrown into the online education space.
Crazy.
Yeah. I mean, we saw Lingoda just not I think the other month, raising 58 million euro to promote their online language service. You'd go student and tutoring space, both of those in the German speaking world, but they raised 70 million euro. Now, those euros are going to go particularly to marketing, which means like
most of those euros,
they're going to be massively pushing online tutoring or online language education. So this is people are not going to forget about it. They can't. It's going to be pushed at them from every angle, from all of these large players and all of this extra funding that's going into this space. So pretty interesting to kind of watch. And that's kind of why, even if you try to play the game of, things will go back to normal in 3 months, things will go back to normal in 6 months, 12 months, 3 years, 10 years. Really? Like, you're going to see differences. Like, in the next 3 months, like, we're both in Europe here, Herbert. Summer, likelihood is that travel restrictions will reduce. Actually, I imagine, and you've seen this on your side, haven't you, Herbert, that demand is picking up now.
Absolutely. For example, summer school in the UK, we're getting bookings from all of Europe. People want to travel. People want to get out of the house, out of the country, and experience and make the most of summer.
So I think those things we would, I don't think there would be a dispute. And I think hopefully we're all optimistic that, vaccines will improve things from a travel perspective. But let's be quite honest that they still won't be at the same peak levels and the same level of ease and the same level
quite a while.
No hesitation. Like, this is going to be there's going to be hesitations for a long time to come that it'll take a little while before things go back to that sort of peak demand. But the thing that we really thought, wasn't it, Herbert, was what happens if you wait? What happens if you just close your doors and wait for things to go back to normal as such? What happens?
I hope no one's doing that, because when you open up shop, then you'll be confronted with a completely new landscape, a different world, and you'll be so much on the back foot that it's going to take a lot of time, money, and effort to catch up. And I don't know if you can do that, with things changing so rapidly even now. So, you've really got to be on the dial of what's happening in the space, how your potential students are, researching, consuming content, and go with that trend. Otherwise you're going to be left behind.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of businesses' momentum as well. So if you're out, like all of the, let's say that you're a physical language school relying on agents and look, I'll just wait it out, and then when things are back to normal, I'll just go back to the agents and I'll start sending me students again. Are you really going to be at the top of their list?
No.
Are even the agents that you were using, are they still going to be in business? Like, if they think like you and were waiting it out too, maybe they'll come back, but where are all their students? Like, where are all those networks? All of those networks have changed. During that time, a lot of their competitors would have gained market share, and then same with yourselves. Like, if you've done nothing, then all of the other companies have really already now built new relationships with potentially your loyal customers or your loyal partners. So that makes it very hard for you to, it's sort of being flat-footed, when someone's running and you're starting from scratch, it's very hard to kind of catch up. So right now, even if it's painful, that adjustment will be totally healthy over the long run. Like, think about where things are going to be at in 3 to 10 years. If you don't want to play the what's it going to be like in 6 or 12?
Yeah.
Like 3 years is going to be different, and it's going to be more digital. But even if it's not, it's going to be different marketing. It's going to be a different strategy. So that's the one thing that we know is that it's not going to be the same as it was. And I think from what I've seen, there's been a lot of older owners that have just hoped that they could just sort of, either get bought out by one of the market leaders or just milk it until you retire, and then you can just close up, and then no problem. But that's accelerated all that to that might have been a 10-year time frame is now no longer there. It's really fundamentally changed, particularly in terms of the competitive landscape.
Yeah.
So it's been fun, Herbert. It sounds a little bit scary, but
fascinating stuff.
If we go back to our original question, it's like, what does it take to grow your language and tutoring company post-COVID? If I was to kind of say what that looked like, it was constantly looking to adapt and looking for opportunity rather than threat. Trying to innovate rather than trying to hide. Trying to experiment with new things even if they don't work, rather than try and just hold and just hope for the best. Any wise words from you before we finish up?
I mean, in terms of marketing, embracing new channels, online channels, new platforms, testing them out, experimenting with them, and you have to test that, and it's going to cost you money, but you have to find the right formula for your school, your education business online, because even if things go back to normal, there's no escaping online marketing.
It's definitely no rewind switch. It's definitely looking towards the future. And if you're a little bit unsure, please check out our other episodes on the Get More Students podcast. We also have a lot of resources also on the LearnCube YouTube channel. We have great playlists that are just focused on online marketing tips. Herbert and I have been doing this for quite a long time and have a lot of your answers either in one format or another. So definitely know that there are some resources to help if you're feeling a little bit unsure. But really the goal of this podcast, the Get More Students podcast, is to give you insights, inspiration, and motivation for your language school and tutoring organization. And in this episode, we really looked at what it's going to take to grow your language and online tutoring company post-COVID. And I really hope that we answered that today. But for now, please subscribe to our Get More Students podcast. Hit that button, and we look forward to helping you out again in the future.
Catch you next time.